I want to start with something that sounds almost funny. The first thing Gloria Hartley ever said to me was that she hoped I liked to cook. We were standing in her kitchen in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, on a Sunday afternoon in October, and her son Ryan had just introduced me as his girlfriend of 4 months, and she had looked me up and down with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and said, "I hope you like to cook, dear." Ryan needs someone who takes that seriously. Ryan laughed it off. I laughed it off. I should have paid more attention to the fact that neither of us laughed easily. My name is Nora Hartley. I am 38 years old. Occupational health coordinator at a manufacturing company on the west side of Oshkosh. I have a practical haircut, and a weakness for good coffee, and a stubbornness that my mother always called my best quality and my worst one simultaneously. I married Ryan Hartley 6 years ago in a small ceremony at a venue on the Fox River. 30 guests. Simple flowers. A dress I loved and still love. Ryan cried when he saw me walk in, not dramatically, just quietly, the way genuinely moved people cry when they are not performing it for anyone. Ryan is a good man. I want to say that plainly and early because this story is about his mother, and I do not want you to confuse the two. Ryan Hartley is kind and hardworking and genuinely, consistently decent in the way that some people simply are, not because life has been easy for them, but because they made a decision somewhere along the way about who they wanted to be, and they kept making it. His one blind spot, his single significant, marriage-straining blind spot, has always been Gloria. Gloria Hartley was 67 years old and had been the organizing force of her family's universe for so long that she had forgotten, or perhaps never learned, where her authority ended and other people's lives began. She was not a monster. I want to be precise about that too. She was not cruel in the obvious ways. She did not scream. She did not issue ultimatums. She did not say the sharp, unambiguous things that you could point to later and say, "There, that is the moment, that is the proof." She operated in the space between. The comment was delivered with a warm smile that landed like a small knife. The suggestion is framed as concern. The help offered in a way that made refusing it feel ungrateful. The presence, always the presence, in our home, in our decisions, in the texture of our marriage, constant and smiling and utterly immovable. Ryan had grown up inside that gravitational field. He could not feel it the way I could because he had never known what it felt like to stand outside it. That was the foundation of every argument we had ever had about her. Not the only argument, but the one underneath all the others. I was in a car accident on a Thursday morning in March. Not my fault. A delivery truck ran a red light at an intersection 3 blocks from my office and hit the driver's side of my car at 40 miles an hour. I remember the sound. I remember the particular quality of the silence immediately after. I remember the airbag and the cold, and someone's voice very far away telling me to stay still. I woke up in a hospital room at Ascension Our Lady of Mercy in Oshkosh with Ryan holding my hand and a doctor explaining that I had a broken left arm, 2 cracked ribs, a lacerated spleen that had required emergency surgery, and a concussion that they wanted to monitor carefully. "How long?" I asked. "At least 2 weeks," the doctor said. "Possibly 3, depending on how the spleen heals." I looked at Ryan. He looked exhausted. He had been there all night. I could see it in him, the particular hollowness of someone who had spent hours being frightened and had not yet fully processed that the frightening part was over. "I'm okay," I told him. He squeezed my hand and nodded and looked away for a moment. That was the last moment of uncomplicated clarity I had for a very long time. Gloria arrived the next morning. I was not surprised. Ryan had mentioned calling her. Of course he had. She was his mother and he had been terrified, and she was the person he called when he was terrified. She had made sure of that across 41 years of being his mother. I understood it. I had accepted it as one of the unalterable facts of my marriage the way you accept weather. She swept into my hospital room with flowers and a container of homemade soup and that particular Gloria energy, organized, purposeful, radiating the specific confidence of a woman who has decided she is needed and has therefore arrived. "Nora." She kissed my cheek, looked me over with the assessing eyes she used on everything she considered her responsibility. "You look pale." "I was in a car accident," I said. She smiled, set the flowers on the windowsill without asking if I wanted them there. I'm going to stay and help, she said. Not a question. A statement delivered in the register of generosity. Ryan can't manage the house and work full-time and be here every day. It's too much for one person. I looked at Ryan over her shoulder. He gave me the look he always gave me when Gloria had already decided something. The look that said, I know. I'm sorry. I don't know how to stop this without starting a war. That's kind of you, Gloria, I said carefully. For a few days. She smiled again. A few days. I would later understand that in Gloria's mind, the phrase a few days had never applied to this situation. She had not packed for a few days. She had not arranged her life for a few days. She had moved decisively, completely, with the full organizational force of a woman who had been waiting for exactly this kind of opening, into my house. And Ryan, exhausted and frightened and relieved to have someone taking charge of the practical details, had let her. The calls started on day 4. Not alarming calls. Small ones. Ryan called to check on me, which was normal and loving, but underneath the check-ins were small mentions that I filed away individually, without yet understanding they were connected. Mom reorganized the kitchen. She says it flows better now. Mom found a water stain on the ceiling in the guest room. She called a contractor to come look at it. Mom said the locks on the back door are old. She's going to get someone to look at them. I lay in my hospital bed with my cracked ribs and my healing spleen, and I listened to these small mentions, and I told myself, she is helping. She is difficult, and she is boundaryless, and she is helping. Let her help. You will be home in 10 days, and everything will go back to normal. I told myself that every day for 10 days. On day 14, the doctor told me I was healing well, and I could go home the following morning. I called Ryan immediately. I'm coming home tomorrow, I said. I'm so ready. I know. His voice was warm, relieved. Mom's been getting the house ready. Getting the house ready. I noticed the phrase. I let it go. That night I lay in the hospital bed for the last time, and I thought about my house. The kitchen with the window above the sink that catches the morning light in a way that still made me happy after 6 years. The garden bed along the south fence that needed attention now that March was turning toward April. The bedroom. My bedroom. My bed. The ordinary, beloved details of my own ordinary life, waiting for me to come back to them. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow, everything goes back to normal. Ryan picked me up at 11 in the morning. He was attentive and careful, the way he always was when he was taking care of me, helping me into the car, going slowly over the speed bumps in the hospital parking lot, asking twice if I was comfortable. We pulled onto our street. I saw Gloria's car in the driveway, parked in my spot. It's fine, I thought. She'll be leaving today. I'm home now. Ryan helped me up the front steps. He reached for his key. It didn't work. He tried again. Nothing. He frowned.
Tried a third time.
That's strange, he said. He rang the doorbell. Footsteps inside. The sound of the deadbolt turning from the inside. The door swung open. Gloria stood in the doorway of my house in an apron I had never seen before, smelling of something baking, smiling the smile that had never quite reached her eyes in 6 years of Sunday dinners and holiday visits, and every small moment in between. There you are, she said warmly. Come in, come in. I've made lunch. I looked at my husband. I looked at the key in his hand that no longer opened our front door. I looked at his mother standing in my doorway, like she had always stood there. She changed the locks, I thought. The thought was very quiet and very clear. She changed the locks on my house while I was in the hospital, and she is standing in my doorway, and she is smiling, and Ryan does not yet understand what she has done. I stepped into my own home. The kitchen had been completely reorganized. The living room furniture had been rearranged. There were new curtains in the front window. And on the kitchen counter, next to a casserole dish and a vase of fresh flowers, was a single key on a hook that I had never put there. One key. Gloria's. She wasn't helping, I understood then. She was moving in. I did not say anything that first night. Not because I wasn't ready to. Not because the words weren't there. They were there, pressing against the inside of my throat with a force that made my jaw ache from holding them in. But I had 2 cracked ribs and a healing spleen and a concussion that still made bright light feel like something personal and hostile, and I understood, with a particular clarity that pain gives you sometimes, that if I started this conversation tonight, I would not finish it well. So I ate Gloria's lunch. I sat in my rearranged living room under Gloria's new curtains and I ate the food she had made in my reorganized kitchen, and I watched her move through my house with the ease of someone who had already decided it was hers. She knew where everything was, not because she had been told, because she had put it there. Ryan sat beside me on the couch, attentive and relieved and completely blind to the thing happening directly in front of him. He kept asking if I was comfortable, if I needed anything, if the pillow was positioned right for my ribs. He genuinely did not see it, I realized. He had been inside it for 2 weeks, and it had normalized around him so gradually that he could no longer see the shape of it. That was the most frightening thing about Gloria Hartley. She didn't storm. She seeped. I waited until Gloria was in the kitchen washing dishes. "Ryan," I said quietly, "your key didn't work this morning." He glanced toward the kitchen, lowered his voice slightly, not because he understood why, but because my tone told him to. "Mom had the locks changed," he said. "The back door lock was old. She was worried about security while you were in the hospital." "She changed the front door lock too?" I said. "Right, she said she wanted them all to match. The same key for everything." He said it the way you say something that was explained to you reasonably and that you accepted without examining. It just made sense logistically. "Ryan." I kept my voice very even. "Did she give you a new key?" A pause. The specific quality of that pause told me everything before he answered. "She said she was getting copies made," he said. "This week." "She has been in our house for 2 weeks," I said. "She changed every lock. And you do not currently have a key to your own front door." He opened his mouth. I closed it. I watched the thing I needed him to see begin to form in his expression. Not fully. Not yet. But the edges of it, the outline of what his mother had actually done while he was too exhausted and grateful to look at it directly. "I'll ask her for the key tonight," he said. "Thank you," I said. Gloria came back from the kitchen with tea she had made in my teapot, in my mugs, in my house, smiling at her smile. I drank the tea. I said nothing else. Not tonight, I told myself. But soon. The key appeared on the kitchen counter the next morning. One key. On the hook Gloria had installed. With a small handwritten label beneath it that said, "Nora and Ryan." As though she had assigned us our own home. I stood in front of that hook for a long time. Then, I took the key. I went to the hardware store on the corner of Washburn and Murdoch, slowly, carefully, because my ribs still made deep breaths a conscious decision, and I had 3 copies made. I gave one to Ryan. I put one in my purse. I put one in the lockbox in my home office that Gloria did not know existed. When I got home, Gloria was in my garden. Not looking at it. Not admiring it. Working in it. She had pulled what she had decided were weeds from the south bed, the bed I had been tending for 4 years, the one with the specific planting arrangement I had designed and adjusted and cared for across 4 Wisconsin growing seasons. Half of what she had pulled were not weeds. I stood at the back door and looked at my south bed and felt something move through me that I did not yet have the energy to fully process. "I tidied it up for you," Gloria called from across the yard. She was wearing gardening gloves. My gardening gloves. It was getting overgrown. "Thank you, Gloria," I said. I went back inside. I sat at the kitchen table. She is dismantling my life, I thought. Room by room. Corner by corner. One reorganized cabinet and one pulled plant at a time. And she is doing it with a smile and a casserole and the language of help so that anyone watching sees a devoted mother-in-law caring for her recovering daughter-in-law. Anyone watching. Including Ryan. That was the architecture of it. That was how Gloria operated, had always operated, in the space where the behavior and the language describing the behavior were 2 completely different things. She said help. She said care. She said, "I just want what's best." And underneath every word was a woman who had decided that my absence was an opportunity and had acted on it with a speed and thoroughness that told me she had been waiting for exactly this kind of opening for 6 years. Maybe longer. I called my sister Dana on a Wednesday afternoon while Gloria was at the grocery store, my grocery store, shopping with my credit card, which Ryan had given her for household expenses, and which she was using with an ease that made me feel like a guest in my own financial life. Dana was 42, sharp, and had disliked Gloria Hartley from the first holiday dinner she attended 3 years ago. "Tell me everything," Dana said when she heard my voice. I told her. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. "Nora," she said carefully, "the locks, the garden, the furniture, the groceries on your card." A pause. "This is not a woman who came to help. This is a woman who came to stay." "I know," I said. "Does Ryan know?" "Ryan knows what he can see," I said. "He can't see all of it yet." "You need to make him see it," Dana said. "Because here's the thing about women like Gloria, they do not leave until something makes leaving necessary. She is comfortable. She has a purpose. She has your house and your kitchen and your garden and your husband's gratitude." A pause. Comfortable people do not choose to become uncomfortable voluntarily. I knew she was right. The question was how. The answer came from an unexpected direction. 10 days after I came home, I went back to work part-time. Half days only, my doctor's instruction, but enough to get me out of the house for 4 hours each morning and back into something that felt like my own life. On my 3rd day back, my colleague Janet, a woman in her 50s who had worked in HR for 20 years and had seen everything, asked me how I was doing. Not physically. The way she said it made clear she meant something broader. I told her, "Not everything. Enough." Janet listened with the focused attention of someone who has spent a career sorting through what people say and what they actually mean. "Is your name on the mortgage?" she asked when I finished. "Both of us," I said. "Joint. Is she paying rent?" "No." "Is there any formal arrangement, written, verbal, anything, that establishes her right to be in that house?" "No," I said. "Ryan just let her stay. She just stayed." Janet looked at me steadily. "Nora," she said, "what she has done, changing the locks on a jointly owned property without both owners' consent, is not just overstepping. Depending on how it's framed, it could be considered unlawful exclusion of a co-owner from their own property." I sat very still. "I need you to talk to someone," Janet said. "Not a counselor. An attorney." The attorney's name was Patricia Weld. Family and property law. An office in downtown Oshkosh on High Avenue, 4th floor, with a directness that I recognized and trusted immediately. She was in her mid-50s, no nonsense in the way of someone who has spent decades watching people make expensive emotional decisions and has developed strong opinions about doing things correctly instead. I sat across from her desk and told her everything. The hospital, the 2 weeks, the locks, the reorganized house, the garden, the groceries, the curtains, the key on the hook with our names on it like she had assigned us our own home. Patricia Weld took notes without visible reaction. When I finished, she set her pen down. "Mrs. Hartley," she said, "is your husband aware that you're here?" "Not yet," I said. I wanted to understand my options before I brought him into this conversation. She nodded slowly. "Smart," she said simply. "Here is what you need to understand. Your home is jointly owned. No third party, including a parent of one of the owners, has any legal right to alter access to that property without the consent of both owners. Changing the locks without your knowledge or consent was legally problematic regardless of the stated reason." She paused. "More importantly, the longer an unauthorized occupant remains in a property without a formal arrangement, the more complicated removal becomes in certain circumstances. Not impossible, but it's complicated." "Complicated. What do I need to do?" I asked. "First," Patricia said, "your husband needs to be part of this conversation. Not because you need his permission, you don't, but because any action taken on jointly owned property requires both owners to be aligned." She looked at me steadily. "Can you bring him in?" "Yes," I said. I was going to have to make Ryan see all of it. Not the edges. Not the outline. All of it. Clearly and completely, and without giving him the option to look away. That conversation was going to be the hardest thing I had done since walking back into my own house and finding it rearranged. I made dinner that night. Not Gloria. Me. I went into my reorganized kitchen And I found what I needed in the places she had put things, and I made the chicken and roasted vegetables that Ryan and I had made together on Sunday evenings for 6 years, and I set the table with our dishes, and I told Gloria, warmly, carefully, with a smile I had learned to use in situations that required more control than I currently felt, that we needed a family evening, and that I hoped she wouldn't mind giving us some space. She mimed me for a reaction with her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she smiled. "Of course," she said. "I'll eat in my room." My room, I thought. She called it her room. Ryan and I sat at the kitchen table after Gloria had gone upstairs. I told him everything. Not emotionally. Not with tears or accusations or the kind of delivery that would let him focus on my reaction instead of the content. I told him the way Patricia Weld had told me, clearly, sequentially, with specific details that did not require interpretation. The locks changed without my consent. The legal implications of that. The conversation with Patricia. The word complicated and what it meant for our home if this continued. Ryan listened. He did not interrupt. When I finished, there was a silence between us that had real weight to it. "She was trying to help," he said finally. "Ryan." I kept my voice level. "She changed the locks on our house. She reorganized our home. She planted herself in our lives so thoroughly in 2 weeks that she is now referring to our guest room as her room." I paused. "I love that you love her. I understand that she is your mother. But what she did was not help. Help is temporary. Help steps back when the person it came for returns. What your mother did was permanent. And it was deliberate." He looked at the table. "She loves me," he said quietly. "I know she does," I said. "And that love is real. But Ryan, she loves you in a way that has never learned to include me. And I have spent 6 years trying to work around that. I cannot work around this." He looked up at me. For the first time since I had come home, for the first time in 2 weeks of Gloria's reorganized kitchen and Gloria's new curtains and Gloria's key on the hook with our names on it, I saw Ryan Hartley clearly. Not the exhausted, grateful, slightly blind man who had let his mother seep into every corner of our life while I was in the hospital. The man I married. The one who made a decision about who he wanted to be and kept making it. He was making it right now. I could see it happening on his face. "What do we do?" he said. I noted. He said we. "We start," I said, "by calling Patricia Weld together. Tomorrow morning." He nodded. "Okay," he said. What happened over the following 2 weeks was the most uncomfortable sustained experience of my marriage. Not between Ryan and me. Between Ryan and Gloria. Patricia Weld advised us to give Gloria a formal notice, written, dated, clear, establishing a move-out timeline. Not hostile. Not punitive. Clear. 30 days from the date of the letter to find alternative arrangements, with a specific date by which the house would need to be returned to its status as a 2-person residence. Ryan wrote the letter. Not me. Ryan. I sat beside him at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning while he wrote it by hand. Because that was who Ryan was, he wanted it to be personal and human rather than printed and clinical, and I watched him write to his mother with the careful, pained deliberateness of a man doing something that cost him a great deal and that he had decided was necessary. Gloria received the letter on a Sunday. She read it in the kitchen while Ryan and I sat in the living room. The silence from the kitchen lasted 4 full minutes. Then she came to the doorway. She was not crying. Gloria Hartley did not cry where you could see it. That was not her register. She stood in the doorway of my living room with the letter in her hand and looked at her son with an expression I had never seen on her face in 6 years. Something stripped down. Something without the performance around it. She looked, for the first time, her age. "Ryan," she said. "Just his name." "Mom," he said. His voice was gentle, but it did not waver. "We love you. This is not about that. But this is Nora's home. It's our home. And we need it back." The silence lasted a long time. Then Gloria looked at me. The smile was gone. The assessed, managed expression she had used on me for 6 years was gone. What was underneath it was complicated and human, and something I had never been permitted to see before. She looked at me like she was seeing me. Actually seeing me. For the first time. "I only wanted to help," she said quietly. "I know," I said. "And I meant it, but help has a shape. And this went past it. She nodded once. She went upstairs. The kitchen was very quiet. Ryan reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, he said, for not seeing it sooner. You see it now, I said. That's what matters. It was not the end. I knew that. Gloria Hartley was not a woman who accepted outcomes quietly or without negotiation. 30 days was 30 days, and what happened inside them was going to require every bit of the steadiness I had. But for the first time since a delivery truck ran a red light in March and changed everything, I felt the weight of my own house settle back around me. Mine, I thought. Still mine. Gloria did not go quietly. I want to be honest about that because I think it matters to the shape of what the story actually is. It would be neater, more satisfying in a simple, clean way, if the letter had been enough. If Ryan's words on that Saturday morning had landed with the weight they deserved and Gloria had packed her things with dignity and left us to rebuild in peace. That is not what happened. What happened was 30 days of the most sophisticated emotional campaign I have ever witnessed up close. And I say sophisticated deliberately because Gloria Hartley did not rage. She did not threaten. She did not say the kind of things that could be repeated to an attorney or a mediator or even a friend without sounding like an exaggeration. She grieved. Loudly. Constantly. In the specific register of a woman who wanted every person in her orbit to understand that she was being treated unjustly, without ever saying so directly. She moved more slowly through the house. She sighed at intervals that were too perfectly timed to be unconscious. She mentioned, in Ryan's presence, small physical complaints, her knee, her back, a headache that had been lingering, that disappeared entirely when she thought no one was paying attention. She called Ryan's brother in Minnesota and had a conversation loud enough to be heard through the guest room door about how difficult things had become and how she didn't want to be a burden to anyone. She wanted him to feel it. I understood. She wanted the 30 days to cost him enough that he would come to me and ask to extend them. I watched all of it with the specific, focused attention of someone who has finally learned to see a thing clearly and refuses to look away again. And I watched Ryan. That was the part that mattered most. Ryan saw it too. Not immediately. Not all at once. But across those 30 days, I watched my husband develop the particular vision that comes from standing on the outside of something you were previously inside. He started noticing the timing of the size. The way the physical complaints clustered around conversations about the move-out date. The phone call to his brother, he had heard it too, through the door, and he came to find me afterward with an expression that mixed sadness and clarity in equal measure. She's doing it again, he said quietly. Yes, I said. She doesn't even know she's doing it, he said. I thought about that for a moment. I think, I said carefully, that's the most complicated part of it. I don't think Gloria sits down and plans this. I think it's so deeply how she operates that it happens automatically. She feels threatened, and the behavior just arrives. The same way it's always arrived. I paused. Which doesn't make it acceptable. But it does make it something other than purely calculated. Ryan looked at me. When did you get so generous about her? He asked. I'm not being generous, I said. I'm being accurate. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. That conversation was the moment I knew we were going to be all right. Not because the Gloria situation was resolved. Because Ryan and I were on the same side of it, fully, clearly, without the fog of his exhaustion or his guilt or the decades of gravitational pull his mother had on him obscuring the view. We were standing together looking at the same thing and seeing it the same way. That had never fully happened before. On day 22, Gloria came to find me. Ryan was at work. The house was quiet in the particular way it got on weekday mornings when the Oshkosh traffic had cleared and the street settled into itself. I was in the kitchen with coffee, working through some documents from the office, when I heard her footsteps on the stairs. She came in and sat down across from me, without being invited. I closed my laptop. Nora, she said. Her voice was different from any register I had heard from her in 6 years. Not the warm performance. Not the grief campaign of the past 3 weeks. Something underneath all of that. Something that had the quality of a woman who had been doing a difficult internal calculation and had finally arrived at a number she didn't like. "Gloria," I said. "I want to talk to you," she said. "Without Ryan." I thought about that for a moment. Patricia Weld's voice in my head. Document everything. But this was not a legal conversation. This was something else entirely, and I could feel it. "Okay," I said. She put her hands flat on the table. I looked at them. It was such a human gesture, such an unguarded, unrehearsed gesture, that it almost startled me. "I owe you an apology," she said. The kitchen was very quiet. "The locks," she said. "The kitchen. The garden." She paused in the garden in a way that told me she knew, had known, exactly what she had pulled from my south bed and what it had cost me. I told myself I was helping. I told myself that was the truth of it. She looked up. I have been telling myself that for a long time about a lot of things. I did not say anything. I had learned, in 6 years of Gloria, that the moments when she was actually saying something real were fragile, that the wrong response could collapse them back into performance. So I sat very still, and I let her continue. "I love Ryan," she said. "You know that." "I know," I said. "I love him in a way that I have never learned to." She stopped. Started again. "I have never learned where it ends, where he ends, and where I am supposed to stop." She looked at her hands again. "His father died when Ryan was 11. It was just us after that. Just us for a long time. And somewhere in those years, I think I decided that my job, my whole job, my entire purpose was Ryan. And I never, another stop. I never updated that. Even after he married you. I never changed the job description. I sat with that for a long time. Not because it excused anything. Not because it reframed the locks or the garden or the 30 days of strategic sighing. But because it was true. I could feel it being true in the way you feel things that have no performance around them. Raw and specific and costly for the person saying them. "Gloria," I said finally. "I don't doubt that you love Ryan. I have never doubted that." I paused. "But you moved into my house while I was in the hospital. You changed my locks. You reorganized my home and planted yourself in my life and used the language of help to do something that was not help. And I need you to understand, not for my sake, not even for Ryan's sake, that those things were not okay." She nodded. Once. The nod of someone accepting a thing they cannot argue with. "I know," she said quietly. "And I need you to understand something else," I said. "Ryan and I are a unit. When you work against me, even with love, even with the best intentions you've ever had, you are working against him. Because we are the same thing." I paused. That is what marriage actually is. Gloria was quiet for a very long time. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street. The morning light was coming through the kitchen window, my kitchen window, the one that caught the light in a way that still made me happy after 6 years, and it fell across the table between us in a way that made the whole room feel very still. "I know," she said again. Softer this time. She left on day 29. Ryan helped her carry her things to her car. I stood on the front porch and watched them make 3 trips. The bags, the box of things she had brought for the kitchen, the smaller box of personal items from the guest room she had called hers. On the last trip, Ryan hugged her in the driveway for a long time. I watched them. I did not look away. I did not feel the thing I might once have felt watching that embrace, the particular exclusion of being outside a bond you cannot enter. I felt something quieter and more solid. The understanding that Ryan loved his mother did not diminish what he and I had built. Those 2 things could exist simultaneously. They just needed the right architecture around them. Gloria walked to the passenger side of her car, looked up at me on the porch. "Nora," she said. "Gloria," I said. A pause. "I'd like to come for dinner sometime," she said. "When you're ready. If you're ever ready." I thought about it honestly. Not the answer that was easiest. Not the answer that closed the door permanently. The true one. "When we're ready," I said. "We'll call you." She nodded. She got in her car. Ryan stood in the driveway and watched her drive away until she turned the corner and was gone. Then he stood there a moment longer, his back to me, very still in the April morning. Then he turned around. He looked up at me on the porch. "You okay?"
I said. Yeah, he said.
He nodded slowly.
Yeah.
I am.
He came up the steps.
We went inside together. I closed the front door behind us. My front door. My lock. My key. Here is what happened after. Patricia Weld drafted a formal boundary agreement, not legally binding in the criminal sense, nothing that could be filed in a courthouse, but a written document that established clearly and specifically the terms under which Gloria would be welcomed into our home going forward. Visit durations. Advance notice required. The understanding that our home was our home, and that any future stay of more than 48 hours required explicit agreement from both Ryan and me in advance. Ryan signed it. Then he called his mother and read it to her over the phone. I sat in the kitchen and listened to him do it, clearly, calmly, without apology, and I felt something settle in the house around me that I had not felt in the 6 years we had lived in it. A particular quality of settling. Like a building that has been slightly off its foundation for a long time and has finally been leveled. Gloria listened. She asked 2 questions, both practical, neither argumentative. She agreed to the terms. She agreed. That was the part one had not been certain of. Not Ryan's willingness to hold the line. He had demonstrated that already in the letter in the 30 days in the driveway. What I had not known was whether Gloria, faced with a boundary that had actual structure around it, would push against it or accept it. She accepted it. Not happily. Not without the particular silence of a woman swallowing something difficult. But she accepted it. I think the conversation in the kitchen had cost her something real. I think saying the true thing out loud, the thing about Ryan's father, about the job description she had never updated, had shifted something internally that no amount of external pressure could have moved. You cannot unsay the truth once you have said it to yourself. It has a way of changing the landscape permanently. I went back to my garden in early May. The south bed was a partial loss. What Gloria had pulled could not be replaced mid-season. But I cleared what remained, amended the soil, and planted what was appropriate for the timing. Tomatoes along the fence. Herbs in the front section. A row of marigolds along the border, because marigolds are the most cheerfully stubborn thing I know, and I was feeling an affinity for that quality. Ryan came out one Saturday morning with coffee and sat on the back steps and watched me work. We should build a raised bed, he said. On the east side. We get more sun over there. I looked at the east side of the yard. Yes, I said. We should. He went to the hardware store that afternoon. We built it together over 2 weekends. Neither of us particularly skilled at it, both of us unwilling to admit that, the result pleasingly imperfect and entirely ours. We planted it with things we picked out together at the garden center, which was the first time in our marriage we had done that, chosen plants together, standing in an aisle of a garden center on a Saturday morning, arguing mildly about whether we needed both basil and oregano. We needed both. Gloria came for dinner in July. Not our invitation. She did not call and invite herself, which was the old pattern. We called her. Ryan did on a Thursday evening, from the kitchen, while I was making dinner. I heard him invite her for the following Saturday, and I heard him say that we would call her if anything changed, and that otherwise we would see her at 6. Structured. Advance notice. Both of us agreed. She arrived at 6 on Saturday with a bottle of wine she had selected carefully, and a dessert she had made that was objectively excellent. We ate at the kitchen table, the table that was back in its original position, in the arrangement that had always made sense to me, under the light that fell correctly when things were where they belonged. Gloria was different at that table. Not transformed. Not a different person. But smaller in a way that was not diminishment, more like the right size. A woman who loved her son and was learning, slowly and with visible effort, to love him in a way that left room for the life he had chosen. She asked me about my garden, not because she had opinions about it, because she wanted to know. I told her about the raised bed, about the marigolds, about what I was planning for the fall planting. She listened the way people listen when they are actually listening, not waiting for their turn, not preparing a response, just taking it in. At the end of the evening, she stood at the front door in her coat, and she looked at me with the expression I had first seen at the kitchen table in April. Stripped down. Unperformed. "Thank you for having me," she said. "Thank you for coming," I said. She hugged Ryan at the door. Then she turned to me. She hugged me too. It was brief and slightly awkward and entirely genuine. I hugged her back. I think about the morning I came home from the hospital. The key that didn't work. The door opened to Gloria's smile. The new curtains in the window and the hook on the wall with our names on it, and the specific, terrible feeling of walking into my own home and finding it rearranged into something that did not quite belong to me anymore. I think about sitting across from Patricia Weld and hearing the word complicated and deciding that complicated was not the same as impossible. I think about Ryan at the kitchen table writing a letter to his mother by hand because that was who he was, a man who wanted to do hard things humanly. And I think about the South Garden bed. The things that were pulled that couldn't be replaced. The space that had to be cleared and amended and replanted with what was appropriate for the season. That is the most honest metaphor I have for all of it. You do not always get back exactly what was taken. Some things are gone, and the season has moved on. And what you can do, what you have to do, is work with the soil that remains and plant what fits the timing and tend it with the same care you gave the thing that was lost. And sometimes what grows back is different from what was there before. Sometimes it is better. My house is mine again. Not in the way it was before, not the slightly unconscious, unexamined way of a person who has never had to fight for something they assumed was simply theirs. In a more deliberate way. A way that knows its own value because it once came close to losing it. Every morning I make coffee at my kitchen window, and I watch the light come through the glass, and I feel the house settle quietly around me, and I think, I built this. Not alone. Ryan built it too. And maybe, in the strangest way, in the way that opposition sometimes clarifies what you are actually made of, Gloria Hartley helped build it too. By testing it completely. By putting every joint and beam of it under a pressure that forced us to find out exactly how solid it was. It was held. We held. And that, in the end, is the only thing that actually mattered. If Nora's story resonated with you, drop a comment below. Have you ever had to fight for your own home? What would you have done differently? At Calm Stories Drama, every story is someone's truth. Subscribe and stay close. There is always another one coming.